It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. The guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
Welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted weekly from a kitchen bench in Kingsland, Auckland, New Zealand. My name's Lewis. I am the host of said show. This week my guest is Kirsty Johnston. She is an investigative journalist for The Herald. Now, there's kind of a two or three-pronged set of reasons that I invited her on the show. I'll start first with how I met her. Well, I didn't actually meet her. How I became aware of her presence as a sentient being. I'd read some of her work on the Herald website, but then I went to a public event that had a sort of think tank panel of media practitioners and experts and so on, talking about what they thought the current state of journalism was and what the future of journalism might be. And issues of gender discrimination in the newsroom and the industry were kind of brought to the table as well. It's quite a major topic. So I thought, firstly, here's someone who I know will be fun and interesting on the podcast. What I'm meaning there is if she'd kind of come across like the teacher in the Peanuts comics, probably not a good guest to get on. But more poignantly, she's doing good work for a media organisation that often in New Zealand I think is kind of used as a sort of a metaphor or a scapegoat for, oh God, this is where we're at with newspapers and journalism these days, which isn't true in the case of The Herald. Like a lot of organisations, the front page of their website presents, what's the cliche? A lot of cat stories and Kardashian arse stories. But if you dig a little deeper, which is kind of your job as an audience member, as much as the job of the journalist plays a part, there is some extraordinarily good long-form journalism being practiced for that newspaper and website. And Kirsty's part of a small and super dedicated team who have presented some stories that have led to change around said topic or person or place, that have illuminated the Herald audience to issues at a depth that said cat story wouldn't, that are, in essence, true journalism that follow, I guess, their code of ethics? The code of ethics, I think kind of paraphrased, is respect for truth and the public's right to information. Okay, so I'll say that again. Respect for truth and the public's right to information. So by getting Kirsty in, she sort of helped me unpack and speak to a wider issue. I think that's one of the biggest issues we've got as the old human race at the moment. In that, when you think about it, where else do we get our perspectives on the world, our information on the world? We don't really meet, in the town square like we used to. A lot of us aren't aligned with things like churches and similarly organised social groups now. So I believe the media is first and foremost the place that informs people when they do things like vote in the US election. Okay, so we talk a lot of that. Actually, Kirsty and I, the sort of philosophy of well, I guess we speak about kind of what the public talk talked about was about, which is the current state of journalism, but more so and more pointedly around the this is our centralized hub for our perspective on the world as a social group, as humans. We touch on that whole fake news, real news, et cetera thing, and how the fact that there are people that, speaking of the word fact, think there might be two sets of facts or even three sets of facts. They might often in the same breath say the Herald is providing one set of this alternative set of facts, which comes back to my highlighting the journalism code of ethics, that it is a job that has a code of ethics, a code of practice, very different to the propaganda organisation spitting out stuff from Russia, or the crazy guy who generates fake news in his underwear late at night in his filthy flat in Wolverhampton. Don't know why it's why, but wherever it is. The truth is the truth. Journalism is journalism. The job involves adhering to the truth. If you do it credibly, if you work for an organisation that is steeped in history to do it credibly, they will only ever deliver you the truth unless something untoward is going on. So that was the satisfaction of the conversation, to wrap that all up, that it was nice to get someone kind of on the shop floor, as it were, and kick about a few of the ideas I guess I do with my students when I do kind of media analysis and theory and why is this also important to you type papers. So enjoyable chat. And someone, most people I've had in, I have some form of connection with, and I'm totally stoked with everyone who's come in, but extra especially the ones who've given up their time to this dude they don't know, who has this podcast that they don't know that anyone listens to. Okay, so thanks, Kirsty. Hey, shameless promotion at the end, getting likes in dribs and drabs, but that social media presence seems to be what it's about these days. So please, as some form of payment or recognition, like me on Twitter if you've not done already. It's at Verbal Highs. On the Facebook, it is at Verbal Highs Podcast, or just search for Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs in the search bar. Verbalhighs.com is the website. There's contact details all over that if you want to get in touch. Shouts to Hallertau for getting in touch. And Verbal Highs at Gmail if you just want to go. So many ways. We're just so connected. All right, enjoy the show, folks.
Verbal High, straight down from up above.
Your brief bio on the Herald site is pretty much bang on, so I didn't really have to compose my own one. Are you happy with that one as it currently is?
Yeah, I wrote that myself.
Ah.
It's always a fun thing to do, to write your own bio.
Yeah. I'll add a couple of extra things I noticed you didn't put in, and that is that you're Canon Media Award winning.
Yes.
Investigative reporter at the New Zealand Herald. You have a strong interest in education, data journalism, multimedia storytelling, and social justice issues. Which I spotted the last bit, and I wanted to talk about that before I saw that you'd self-referenced that there, so that's good. We'll get back to the social justice thing. Oh no, now I've gone off the list. Oh, there we go. Your journalism career started at a regional paper in Taranaki in 2008 before moving through online and Sundays reporting. You've done the obligatory cat up a tree yarn, but more recently have been focusing on much kind of longer and more in-depth reads, although, I mean, maybe there has been a feature-length cat up a tree article. If there has, I haven't read it.
I would love to write that.
Yeah. Welcome, Kirsty. Johnston.
Hi.
Hi. So I got you in today because, like, we were just talking about off air. Is it called off air? I spotted you at the Golden Dawn, sort of talking about, what was it about? It was about kind of the state of journalism at present, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was about the state of journalism and also women in the media. Was that one of my other favourite topics? So.
It's funny you say one of your other favourite topics, because I was thinking about that, talking about kind of gender in the newsroom and stuff today, and I was almost like, is that kind of trite to talk about, or are you meaning it is one of your favourite topics to talk about?
No, I think it's important. I mean, in New Zealand, I don't know how much kind of systemic sexism there is in newsrooms, but there was a survey that came out last week showing that female reporters were paid 26% less than their male counterparts. Yeah. So it's kind of
That's crazy. That's like a quarter.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I don't know. I don't feel like I've been discriminated against, but there's something there. So it's always worth kind of staying on top of that and advocating for women.
Yeah, the pay thing's interesting because, I mean, I know when you're really talking about kind of systemic discrimination, that might even be, I mean, it's a huge issue, but part of a wider issue. But you know, I wonder if you start to wonder as you look around your work, who's paid what? Because I certainly don't know at my work based on anything, let alone gender. It's not the sort of thing you ask people in the lunchroom, is it?
No, and I think most contracts have confidentiality clauses in them. Although being journalists, you know, everyone's a little bit nosy, so I don't think it's too big a secret. But yeah, it's something to stay on top of. And I mean, it's more than just pay; it's promotions.
Well, that's what
and
I was
that
saying.
Kind of thing.
Totally, yeah. Goodness, gone down this route already.
Yeah, we got there really quickly.
I actually wanted to start at the beginning because because I did notice with some of the bigger articles you're known for, the articles about kind of treatment in the mental health system and what's going on in the schooling system, from treatment to things like NCA and so on. Yeah, there is this. I mean, I know social justice can be like a really hackneyed phrase thrown around these days, and actually sometimes, unfortunately, it has kind of negative connotations, but certainly not going there. But you know, your background and your kind of growing up and stuff, does it come from kind of where you're from? And
I really don't know where my interest in any of that stuff comes from. I would say I'm from a relatively privileged background, although I mean my parents divorced when I was pretty young, but I don't think that's a big thing these days. I've got a big supportive Pākehā middle class family, so I haven't really ever experienced any of the issues that I write about, but it doesn't.
So where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
We moved all around when I was in primary school, but I went to high school at Hamilton Girls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what?
Straight down the middle, really.
What does that mean?
Hamilton Girls.
What does straight down the middle mean?
I don't know. Like I think it was a decile 7 or 6 or something. So yeah, definitely just a middle of the road kind of.
See, now even later on, I wanted to ask a bit. I needed someone to explain NCAA to me, but I'm of a generation where I don't even know what decile 7 means. I mean, I know what the numbers mean if you're like a 1 or whatever, but what does it go to when you say straight down the middle? Does it go to 14?
No, it goes to 10.
Okay.
So 10's the highest.
Yeah.
In most parts of the country, you'd see like a relatively even spread of students across that, but in Auckland you don't. There's lots of poor kids, lots of rich kids because of our inequality. Yeah.
And do you reckon that's got worse in your lifetime? Like the gap?
From the data, it's definitely getting worse. Particularly in Auckland, you can see people skewing at either end. Oh, I guess inequality is getting worse, isn't it? If you read the right measures in New Zealand, Gini coefficient and that kind of thing. Yep. Yeah,
it's odd and alarming. You know, even I was away 6 or 7 years, kind of permanently. Obviously, coming back to holiday and catch up and stuff. But you know, even moving back. In that period of time, it's like, shit, things can really change really quickly. Back to you like early on, why were you guys moving around? Were you moving around the country or moving around just schools?
Yeah, we moved around the country. I think it was my dad's job and then my mum's job, so we kind of just moved around the wider Waikato region. So I went to about 5 different primary schools. Yeah,
so you must have got a wide perspective on people then.
I guess so. Do you notice when you're a kid though? I guess I had to meet people a lot. I had to make new friends quite a lot, which might help for journalism because it kind of helps you with that rapport side of things.
I've been watching that Secret Life of 4-year-olds, not having 4-year-olds around myself, and I think you really do soak all that stuff in as a kid. I think a lot of your kind of personality and stuff's set at a really young age. So yeah, I'd say you would have been soaking that all up compared to, you say straight down the middle, but you weren't at one school with one set of kids for all that time. So I'm sure that must have had some kind of, I feel like we're on a psychiatrist kind of couch thing now.
I love it. I love that kind of thing. Should we do our Myers-Briggs next and then analyse each other?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what were you like at school?
I took school pretty
Look at my
easy.
notes.
Like, it wasn't that challenging for me, really. I thought it was fine. I've got a twin brother,
Yeah.
and so
Identical?
he's a boy.
Can you not be identical?
No, you can't.
Oh.
So yeah, we
Identical, but with shorter
literally
hair.
I get asked that like every single time
Yeah.
I say I'm a twin. Yeah, school was fine. I think I was over it by the time I left, isn't everybody? By the end of 7th form, you're like, oh, get me out of here.
Yeah, yes. I don't know if I was over it. I actually really liked high school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're one of those.
Yeah. I think things might have started to go downhill after that, to be honest.
Well, I went to boarding school, so I think like some of it was wanting to get out of that environment, just being in a school
I wouldn't like
environment
to go
all
to
the
boarding
time.
school.
Yeah, it was pretty intense.
So was it like you're saying, just kind of little nonchalant about it? Was it because you found it too easy, or was it because you found that the way things were taught didn't really suit who you were, or...
Yeah, I think maybe it's like a hint of things to come, but I definitely found the way the classes were structured and everything quite boring. I think most journalists definitely have that kind of anti-establishment
Yeah.
thing going on. That's probably what was happening.
Yeah. So, what exactly wasn't right with classes and so on?
I don't know, I guess. Who wants to sit in a room and be talked at for an hour about something, you know? Like, I just thought they probably could have done it better. I think, like, by the end I was just doing lots of study by myself, which I think is what they do. One of my younger cousins, she's doing that IB, International Baccalaureate, and that
Yeah.
seems to be a lot more self-selecting.
Is this like
Sounds
another
cool.
alternative to NCA?
Yeah, it's one of those ones that...
Because you've got Cambridge, NCA, and now this...
Yeah, that...
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming, look, I this is just an assumption I make with someone who's become a journalist, but also an investigative journalist, which is obviously different to, or reporter as you call yourself, which is obviously different to, kind of short form, front page kind of community newspaper reporting, whatever. So I'd assume that, because my guess is people with those kind of core skills are going to get through exams and so on and stuff. So I'm guessing like you didn't sort of struggle with the content so much at school because you had the reading and writing and
Yeah.
so on to an advanced kind of level.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. It's so long ago, but I really liked in comparison university where it was you just did it.
Did you go to uni?
Yeah,
Oh, so what did you do at uni?
I did a BA in
Yeah.
media and English and Japanese because I'm kind of indecisive and I didn't know what to drop, so I just did 3 majors.
How's the Japanese going?
It's fallen off significantly.
What do you call it? Kanji? No, what do you call the text?
Kanji, yeah.
What's harder, the calligraphy or the speaking?
I think Japanese language in itself is not that complicated. They do have some levels of like formality,
Yeah.
which can be a little tricky to get your head around. But yeah, it's definitely the writing system that takes a lot of time.
Have you been?
Yep.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
It's upside down land.
I want to go back.
It's yeah. I can't speak highly enough of. I mean, I was only there probably a week or so, but I was like, I could live. I thought to myself, I could live here, but then I thought I could only live there if I had like a crew or a partner or whatever. Because I suddenly thought if you were there on your own and you had a bad few days, like say in your job or whatever, it's so different to the world I know that I think you could end up like feeling quite
Isolated.
lost
maybe?
there, isolated. Yeah.
There's a lot of people, but yeah, it's really beautiful. I'd love to go back to Japan.
They're just they are as it's. I think it's a culture that you could spend a lifetime trying to kind of
Work out.
suss out from a Western perspective.
Yeah.
And you know that song "Turning Japanese"?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I talked to a couple of people over there who are like, that song is actually really a thing. Like, you actually takes a while. Once you've been living there a while, you do start to turn Japanese. Then if you come back here, you actually have to kind of turn back because it's so different.
Yeah, it's such an interesting culture. It's actually with such a long history, but it is. Yeah, it's really a really specific culture that you don't. It's not similar to anywhere else.
Well,
really,
99-point-something% racial purity there. Like they're a country that have really cut themselves off for the world, so that's a big part of the reason. Yeah. So that's interesting. So I was just a total guess that you'd left high school, done your journalism diploma and gone straight into journalism. So you've said you're decisive. You did not three different majors, surely, at uni.
Yeah.
How long did that take?
Just 3 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's arts, come on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No.
So no inkling of becoming that kind of writer while you were doing that, or did you get the idea while you were at uni?
Yeah, I think I did a little bit of student media, and when I say a little bit, I mean probably 2 things. But in the holidays, at that point, my mum was living in Gisborne, so I go back there, and I did a couple of stints at the Gisborne Herald, and that's where I started to get an interest in it. And then I don't know if they've got them anymore, but I got a Fairfax internship, which means that they pay your fees to go to journalism school.
Wow.
And that's how I ended up at Taranaki, because basically you get kind of sponsored by a newspaper.
Wow, that's great. So, like, best of both worlds. So you got a job hanging in the wings, and you've got them supporting you to kind of... So did you just approach them initially and say, when you say I had a couple of stints there, did you just see an ad or something, or...
No, I think I just approached them. I think I just emailed saying I'd like to do some experience. I think it's quite a good thing to do, because I think lots of people have an idea of journalism that doesn't at all reflect what it is actually like. And I know lots of people maybe get even halfway through their journalism training, and then they go to a newsroom for the first time, and it's a total shock.
How?
I think probably the banality of it. Like, when you start out, it's not very interesting.
No.
It's a lot of calling on the phone for not much result. There's a lot of little stories you do, a lot of the same stories.
Yeah.
You could probably do your first 6 months just writing about weather,
Yeah.
It's New Zealand. People are really into their weather.
Yeah. And cats being caught up the tree as the result of weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember in 4th form, I did work experience for Radio New Zealand, probably at a similar level of journalism team as you've discussed in the early days. And I remember the woman almost being like apologetic because she just hadn't thought of anything in particular for me to do. So I think I cleaned some of their tape heads on their old tape machines for one day of the 2 days.
That sounds about right.
We excitedly rushed to something one afternoon. I think she was far more excited than I was. And then nothing really happened at the other end. But
yeah, I think the first big exciting thing that I went to was a fire, Oh, a fire, a house burned down.
Yeah. But, I was thinking about that as well. Tell me if I'm completely wrong here with what you're meaning, where people have a different impression of it. Like, doing what you're doing now is probably what they see as, romanticised journalism. Because I was thinking about that in terms of, when people train to be lawyers, or that they get a legal degree, and everyone hopes they'll be like a criminal defence lawyer, but then there's like property law and blah 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 law. So is that kind of what you're meaning, that everyone thinks they're going to be out getting the scoop?
Well, I think like 80-90% of people probably get into journalism because they like writing. I mean, that was definitely a big reason for me. So everybody comes in thinking, oh, I'm going to be a feature writer.
But all that early stuff's really formulaic, and Yeah.
And so, the kind of stuff that I'm doing now is probably what people think they're going to do. But even then, so much of what I do is sheer banality, like, making a spreadsheet out of 1,000 different pieces of information, and that might take you 3 weeks, and in the end you only get a 400-word story or something. It's still not particularly sexy, I don't think.
No, but no, it's not. Sorry, I didn't mean no, it's not sexy. I meant
it isn't.
I was going to ask with the spreadsheet thing. So is that you mean to try and collate all this? So essentially, you're doing what we discussed that I've been doing the last few years in a way, which is research based a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And you're right, it is quite solitary often. It's quite banal, but at the same time, I guess with both our examples, it's what's really necessary for kind of accuracy and integrity. But
yeah, that example I was talking about was when I did a story about the torture reports.
yeah,
So they hadn't been published before, and I had to use the Official Information Act to get hold of them. And what they are is they are the Ombudsman's Office. They have a specific group called the Torture Inspectorate, and they go into things like mental hospitals or small areas of hospitals where people are in compulsory care.
yeah.
And they just check on how people are being treated. And then they write this report. And those are the things that I got. But I ended up with about, 80 of them.
Yeah,
and so I
yeah.
had to go through it. And the only way to kind of get a sense of them was to make this big table,
Yeah. Is that because you can't go ahead and say, oh, all 80 of these people are being treated? You're trying to get to the bottom of what's happening in each
Yeah, because they
case.
weren't people, they were specific wings, and so there'd be notes.
Wings of
yeah,
institutions.
and so it would be a report on the institution, and so each report had certain things they had to tick off. So I just kind of made a spreadsheet of those things, and then you could say, was this happening, was that happening? And then
Yeah.
it forms the basis of a story.
So is that what led to the article about Ashley Peacock? Is that the...
No, that was a follow-on from Ashley.
okay.
So the Ashley story came first.
Yeah.
So after we realised what was happening to Ashley, he was in one of those institutions.
Yeah.
And there was a report on him by that inspectorate. And then I think I got talking to them and I said, how many of these reports are there and why aren't they public? And that's when I eventually ended up saying, well, I want to see them all. I had
Talking
to get
to
them.
who? The torture...
Yeah.
I mean, who even knew we
I
had
know.
that? Because I remember I read that.
Yeah.
It reminded me when you said that, and I was like, well, that interests me as a journalistic scoop to begin with. Like, who knew we had... What are they called? Torture...
I think they're called torture inspectors. So they come under the Ombudsman's Office, and it's a United Nations thing. There's a torture protocol that we signed up to.
Yeah.
So as part of that, we have this little stream.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so wouldn't it have been in their interests for the time before you came along to be getting the media involved, or were you the first person who sort of
Yeah.
got in touch and asked? Because it seems quite, like I say, it's quite a, it seems quite an issue to sort of have been under the cover for all that time.
Yeah, I think there's no provision within their kind of guiding rule book or whatever that means they have to publish them, or it was difficult. Like they were only supposed to be giving them to the hospitals,
Yeah.
so all the DHBs. So I mean, it was kind of difficult for them to come to light. But I think the new ombudsman is trying to fix that, and he wants all those reports to be on their website.
Right.
Yeah.
So it kind of served them better before you came along for it not to be in the public eye.
I mean, I don't know if it served them. I just think they hadn't really written anything into the rules, so there was no way for them to make those public.
Yeah.
But now I think they're changing that.
So I'm interested with that, like, where does that, whether it's that story or anything else that kind of unfurls itself and becomes more and more major as you I guess uncover it or research it or follow that story, like where do these start? Are they, because you're writing very in-depth articles a lot most of the time. There's obviously a lot of time goes into those, which I want to get to later on. But where do these start? Is it your ideas? Is it tip-offs? Is it reading about something else? Like, what's the genesis?
So when I was at the Sunday Star Times, probably about 5 years ago, I did get a tip-off from this guy who initially I thought he was mad. He emailed us and he was alleging all this stuff about a home for the intellectually disabled, and I thought, man, this guy seems crazy. But he emailed me again, and I thought, I'll just get him to come in, he seems like a nice guy.
Yeah.
Rang him up, got him to come in, and I said, you need to bring some documentation, like, bring some bits of paper. And he brought enough that I thought, maybe there is something here.
Is he a resident?
He was a guy, his name's Colin Bergering. He actually died last month.
Oh.
Yeah, but he was the head of something called the Justice Action Group, who they work with these intellectually disabled people, like really tough
Right,
clients.
so that's what I was getting at. He wasn't one of the patients in the mental health system.
No, he wasn't a patient. He'd been working within the system and he'd seen all this stuff.
Yeah.
So he brought me these documents, and what eventually we wrote about and what had happened was that this institution, it's called Parklands, out at Tuakau, south of Auckland, had been abusing the clients, like not feeding them, not changing them. The name of the story was The Boy Who Ate Grass, because there was one really intellectually disabled guy who they just left alone, and he would eat grass and he'd get sick.
It's like we think. Well, to me, it's like I go, oh yeah, all this stuff used to happen in the 60s.
Yeah,
all that
exactly.
old footage you see of,
Yeah, when before deinstitutionalisation. Well, no, it's still happening, and if anything, it's like even harder to keep an eye on because there's so many little ones. Anyway, so I did that story about Parklands, which had shut down. The Ministry had shut it down. Ministry of Health shut it down, but they kept it a secret, right? And then I just kept digging, and we found there'd been a couple more that the same thing had happened.
They shut it down, but they kept us. So they knew there'd been a problem there, but they were trying to brush under the carpet by shutting it down.
Yeah, so they shut it down, and then they didn't issue a press release saying, "Look, this is what's happened" or anything. They just quietly closed it, and there was a couple more the same. It turned out. So I'd done all that work that at the Star Times. And then when I started at the Herald, and in that time I'd heard about Ashley. There'd been a couple of small articles about him. Yeah. And then when I was at the Herald, I got an email saying, could you have a look at this case? And it was Ashley, just from a contact, from that, from doing all that work. Yeah. Yeah, and that's just how it goes, I think. Yeah.
But you follow from a line of interest of your own, coming back to the interest you set out in your blurb: education, equality, social justice, and so on. Like you are, because it's a big world out there. Yeah. I'm assuming that you're, what do you call the person above you? Is it not your editor in your department? You're the head of your team.
I guess we would have a manager.
Yeah. Is it a matter of negotiation, or you pitching ideas, or I've got this lead, or how does it? Because it's a lot of coming back to what I said before. It's a lot of time and resources. So I would assume that you aren't just left to your own devices every single time to follow that story.
No. So if you work in the general newsroom, you'd have a round. So when I first started at the Herald, I was the education reporter. Yeah. So there's education, social issues, health, whatever. Yeah. So that's how that side of it works, and then I shifted to the investigations team, which is more that long-form project-based work. And so that's pitching, usually. Unless something comes across the editor's desk and he says, oh, we really want Kirsty to look at that.
So in a... I was going to get to this later, but hey, it feels right now. In this world of, often unfairly, I think, fuck the Herald, sort of just people throwing that stuff up online, your team, a great case in point of, thorough, long-form journalism occurring on a daily basis. How many of you are there in that team? The point I wanted to make there with the Herald thing is I've just sort of noticed it more and more lately. It seems to be becoming like, in this world of what's fake, what's real, what's thorough, what's not, it sort of bothers me in the same breath that whole institutions are being lumped into perhaps, just the clickbait front page side of things. I've opened two different points up here. To the first point with the investigative journalism thing, how many of you on that team, because I'm guessing you all have different areas, you can't all sort of be interested in the same thing, surely?
So there's about 7 or 8 of us. Yeah. And we do have different areas. I tend to look around education-ish, disability stuff. And then there's other people who do crime. Yeah. Matt Nippert does kind of finance, business stuff. Dylan does sport. Another colleague, Liv, she does health. So we kind of cover a bit of a spectrum.
What are you doing investigative-wise with sport? Like trying to get deeper stories than just coverage of games and so on?
Yeah, so last year Dylan did a big piece about the links between Alzheimer's and rugby. Yeah. That was one. He also looked into...
knocks on the head?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a really interesting piece, actually. And he does other things like looking into sporting institutions and that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. So
I weirdly segued off there, as I said to the other points, so we'll finish that one off now.
That.
Do you feel that your institution gets an unfair rap based on how effing hard you guys are working where you are?
I mean, people are always going to hate the media, you know?
Yeah.
It's the thing. If you look at those surveys of, like, trusted professions, journalists are always down the bottom. You know, we're just above real estate agents.
I don't think that. I don't think that at all. Maybe. I guess that's because yeah.
And I think the Herald, with its online presence, it is quite, it has kind of radicalised in the last couple of years.
What do you mean radicalised? Well, that could mean a number of different things.
I mean, I think it used to be, you know, staid old granny Herald with, you know, the story, the national story of the day, and quite Auckland focused. And I think the online presence has become a lot more, you know, vibrant, and it is more, I guess people like to call it clickbait, but it's weird that people say that, because it's like, those are just the stories that people are clicking on. Yeah. Like, we're not going to put them on there.
It's not bait. It's actually you just
what
clicked
you guys
on
want.
it. Yeah.
You guys want that. Don't whinge about the Kardashians and then click on it, okay?
Yeah. I'm not the Kardashians, but yeah, that's right. I'm guilty of that, and I've thought about that. I'm like, okay, I did that.
Yeah, I don't think no one. I mean, it doesn't particularly bother me. It does when people say there's no good journalism in New Zealand.
Yes, totally.
And like
that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Our team had an awesome year last year, and not just our team, but the Herald in itself, you know. We had a whole bunch of stories that changed laws or exposed injustices and that kind of thing. But people, you know, I mean, people just see what they want to see, and if they want to think the Herald's just clickbait, they will, you know.
I think people also, well, we can't say all people, that's too general of us as well, but, you know, a lot of people just also grab onto a prevailing narrative. Although this is what everyone's saying about that, so that's the way it is. It's sort of hard to come back from that. Is that child going to...
I don't know.
I forgot to pull the door shut.
Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, go on. This is really at a kitchen bench, folks.
It's okay, we filmed a documentary last year. I got really used to audio issues.
Why audio issues? Because it's just hard to capture audio.
It's just hard, yeah. We were always filming outside, and there were always planes filming past at a particular point or something.
So with the affecting change, what sort of changes on a national level have you seen come from your articles? It must be pretty satisfying or vindicating, or whatever the word is, to see, you know, action as a result of your words.
Yeah, I think the biggest one I had last year was I wrote a story about a little boy being locked in what the school termed a timeout room in Wellington.
Where I grew up, yeah.
Was it in Miramar?
Yeah. I didn't go to that school, but yeah, it felt pretty close to home, that's for sure.
Yeah, and so he had been locked in that room, and then it turned out a lot of other children at that school had been locked in that room, and then it turned out that a lot of schools across the country were using rooms like that, what's termed seclusion rooms. And there was a massive outrage, and then Hekia Parata, the education minister, eventually introduced a bill to get rid of those. So
again,
it was quick.
Quick, yeah, absolutely, because it's pretty shocking stuff to hear. So again, like, I was just, it never happened to me, but I remember there being corporal punishment in schools. I think it changed when I was about halfway through high school. So again, I was like, when I read that, I was like, what? This is like I'm reading something from 20 or 30 years ago. So are you often surprised by the things you're encountering?
No.
Why not? I mean, that's a great answer.
I'm really never surprised at things that humans can do to each other.
But is that come as a result of doing the job, or have you always been like that? Is it just because you've got a bit jaded through?
No, I think maybe just from the job. I just think, as well with seclusion rooms as well, I could see the rationale for why they were put in. It was in the early days of people understanding things like autism, and at the time they seemed like a good idea.
I don't remember them. Do you remember them?
And then I definitely don't remember them.
Neither do I. But anyway,
well, they came out of something called sensory modulation stuff, so kids could feel calm and touch things. And
it's called solitary confinement in jail.
Yeah, it is. But it came out of that kind of place. But then thinking rapidly changed. But schools must have somehow got it in their heads that this was a thing to do. I don't know. It's just it's very strange.
Do you? Because a colleague at my work, actually, she just finished a PhD on people at a different part of their career than yours, for sure. I'm pretty sure it was early career journalists. but how a lot of young journalists now, particularly female, are sent out to do to cover sort of quite harrowing topics and so on. And I, whether it was death knock journalism, or whatever. And as I say, different to what you're doing, but getting to a point I wanted to ask about is. How do you take all this stuff home with you? You know, like, how do you separate? Because you're in the way I see it, a sort of vocation where you can't really separate yourself from what you're uncovering and researching and stuff. So, you know, how do you keep your head safe?
I don't know.
Or is that not an issue of
drinking?
Like, am I being yeah.
Wine?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, some stories, I think you learn quite quickly. You learn quite quickly to separate.
Great answer.
You learn quite quickly to separate yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and not let it get to you. There in journalism culture, there is that kind of hard ass, you know, don't cry about this thing. But then equally at work, if we need it, we have free counselling and all that kind of thing.
But no one ever uses that sort of
They
thing.
do. They do actually use it. Yeah.
Right.
But I don't know if people use it for work. Largely, we just kind of hang out with each other and talk about it, I think. I have like our...
In bars.
Yeah, in bars. But we have like a really solid journalistic community, not just within the Herald, but across the country. And, you know, you can talk about this kind of thing with other people. I don't know, yeah, there has been some research done on the way it affects people. Trauma definitely affects journalists in different ways. I don't know if I've been affected. I found Ashley Peacock, I found him really hard to get out of my head. It made me so angry.
Yeah, I watched the... I don't think you were behind it, but I think one of your articles linked to it, the video that an organisation, I forget who they are, had made about him. And, yeah, man, I watched that last night. It was hard work for me, and I wasn't even involved in any way, you know. Yeah, agreed. It's a really sad story.
Yeah, and I think largely because I worked on that story for about 6 months and just nothing changed, and you just feel... I don't know how his parents have done it, but I just felt like I was bashing my head against a brick wall. You know, you've got all these experts saying, stop, you know, this is harming him. It's not making him better what you're doing. Yeah. But the officials don't want to recognise that, and it's really difficult to think that you're not making any headway.
So what's their arguments that it's for the public's good or something because he can lash out or whatever? Is that
public safety?
Public safety. Moving away from that to back to the, I guess, the practicalities or the kind of day-to-day stuff of long-form stories I'm interested in. You mentioned 6 months before. That's something else I wanted to ask about is like, do you also negotiate like time frames? Because I'd imagine you can't go, I'm just going to do this one for 2.5 years and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, we definitely...
You got deadlines.
Deadlines, yeah. So normally we would pitch a story and we would say, I need to go here, I need to do this, and I've got this on, and we just kind of work out a rough time frame. The thing with the long form pieces as well is that increasingly it's video, which takes longer. Yeah. And then there's also, like, with the Under the Bridge, which was the documentary piece we did, we needed a bespoke template for it online. So then we built that as well, which adds time. So there's a lot of things kind of going concurrently. Let's
go talk about that now. Yeah. Because I'm sure you've had similar feedback from a lot of people. I thought it was really amazing. This is Under the Bridge we're talking about, which is the... let me get this right on the spot. Papakura High School. Yeah. Just basically a year in the life of students there because it's a low decile school, and I think beforehand they'd had some rough coverage in the media. Is that right? And then you approached them and you thought that the principal might not kind of play ball, as it were, but he said, come in and spend time there. But for listeners who haven't kind of seen it or read the article, it's just a matter of Googling Under the Bridge with the Herald. But so I watched the film first and then read the article. I mean, it's been covered, kind of pioneering for New Zealand, just really open question or discussion point from the beginning. Just describe the process. Where did all this come from? Because it looked like a huge job. And well done, by the way, as well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So, like, towards the end of 2020, God, it must have been 2015. It seems like such a long time ago.
Did it only take nearly 2 years just doing that?
It was one...
I'm sure
it was the
did.
end of 2015, so it took just over a year.
Yeah.
I wanted a year-long project,
Yeah.
and I initially thought about following a family who were maybe homeless or something like that.
Yeah.
And then a whole bunch of people pointed out to me why that was problematic. And
Because they might not be anywhere one day.
yeah, or, you know, there's that whole thing about the single story, like you can't use one person's experience to represent a group of people,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I was at a party and I was talking to someone, actually it was Duncan Grieve, the editor of the spin-off, and he was like, do Friday Night Lights, KJ, you know, do a cohort study.
What's Friday Night Lights?
It's that, the book, you know, the book about football in Texas, and he followed the team for a year.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So he was like,
I don't know, but
yeah.
Yep.
It's, yeah, anyway, you can look that up. And so I thought, oh, of course, because I've got education background, I could do a group of kids, you know, a group of students. And then Papakura at that time had the worst kind of government review you could ever have in the history of the world, and they were getting a new principal, and so I thought, oh, that'd make quite a nice thing. And so I rang him, and for some reason he agreed. I was not thinking he'd agree.
Well, I think it comes across in the film and the story why he agreed,
Yeah,
based
he's
on the
great.
sort of man he is.
Yeah, he's such a good dude.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really have nothing
Oh,
but
yeah, it
total
came
respect for
across.
him.
Sorry, anyway.
yeah. So and he agreed, and then I just kind of had to get work to agree. And at the start, I wasn't even thinking of video. And then somebody, maybe Jared Savage, who used to be our manager, he said, "Do it as video. You know, it's the new thing. The Herald's really wanting video." And so I rang up our videographer, Mike Scott, who hadn't actually even started work at the Herald yet. He wasn't even starting.
Hey, I got a job for you. Your first job. It's
I
going
was
to be
like, yeah, do you want to do a thing? It's going to be cool.
362 days,
Yeah, I was like,
so
say
it
yes.
won't be too long.
Yeah, like, just say yes.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
Yeah.
And then so we just kind of went from there, and we ended up having 3 shooters. So we had Mike, who kind of acted in a director's capacity. Then we had 2 other guys, Nick Reed and Michael Craig, and they filmed as well for us.
And so, what are you doing? Because what are you doing? Like when you're, what are you doing when you're out there with them? It's like, are you?
I'm just lurking around.
But you'd almost be taking on a sort of secondary director's role, wouldn't you? Because it's your project.
Like a
Surely
producer.
you want to know what it's going to look like and stuff. So, did you have a crash course in filmmaking just by nature of doing that? Like you must have learned a lot.
I basically took on the producer's role, and we work with Greenstone Television, and they kind of advised us on stuff. But yeah, it was mainly just kind of finding our way. We had no idea what we were doing really, but we had really great kids. Like the talent were awesome.
Yeah.
And we spent a while, I think we did about 2 or 3 weeks without the cameras, just going and seeing them, just to get them used to us. And then we just went from there.
And because again, this is all secondhand, it was your thing, but correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing because it wouldn't have been financially viable for the Herald as an organisation, you got New Zealand On Air funding as well for the video side of it, so that's kind of a different approach. Is that right? Is that why it was? Because it was too much for one organisation to take on?
No, I think the Herald had committed to it by that stage, but the New Zealand On Air funding allowed us to do, like, have more professional post-production work for Greenstone to help us in a bigger role, and also to get photographers to come in and backfill the guys when they were out on our project.
Because I think that's, this is my commentary separate to your project, but yeah, New Zealand On Air have obviously done great things over the years, but they kind of felt to me like they probably needed to branch out in a few different ways. And so I presume and I hope they're really happy with the result, because it was something new for them as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think they're happy. I think they are, because we got that under the documentary stream before they changed the way they do funding, and now they've got like just an online stream or something like that. So hopefully more people will be getting that.
So just on the ground there, like funny moments and stories and so on, did you you must have started to feel really quite connected to all those students and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're great, but they're a nightmare. You know what teenagers are like.
Yeah.
Like, you try and get hold of them, they don't reply. Like, Wendy, you shouldn't have a phone.
Yeah.
Like, they'd be like, yeah, miss, I'll meet you. And I'd be like, cool, when? And they just wouldn't reply. So we'd just, like, turn up at the school and be like, well, hopefully they're going to be there.
Yeah.
And towards the end of it, we got way more chilled out about it because we were like, oh, they'll be around somewhere.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
It's like I was talking about Japan before. You started, acclimatizing to the culture out there.
No, great. Like, I remember the night of the ball was probably the most stressed out I felt the entire time.
Yeah.
Because they had to be at the school by like 7 to get the bus to go to their ball, and they weren't there. And one of the photographers was with 2 of them at a house somewhere, and I was ringing him and I was like, Michael, like, the kids need to get here or they're not going to get to the ball, and we really need this footage. And the buses were like leaving, and it was just like, oh my god. And then they turned out like chilled as, oh, we're a bit late. They just.
So what was the last day that you spent out there? Can you remember?
The last day of filming that we did was filming the last set piece, which was where we kind of followed them as they were leaving school for the last time.
Quite emotional.
Yeah, it was quite emotional. They're so great, and I'm still in touch with them, and I just hope for them all the time. Like, I just want them to do their best because they've got such awesome potential.
So it's a big question. What went wrong in the years beforehand? How have we ended up with schools so radically different from one another, or has it always been that way? Or is because from what I understand, Papakura hasn't always faced the struggles it has in the last X amount of years.
Yeah, there's definitely been some stratifying, Like,
oh goodness, I almost need to look that. What does stratifying mean? What does that word mean?
Like, like leveling out,
Yeah.
So one end becomes the school that everyone wants to go to, and all the smart, good kids that are good at sport go there, and then the others go to.
So it's to do
schools.
with, rather than going into political stuff and so on, it's zoning to begin with.
Yep. So there's zoning, and then you've got desirable schools. There's that whole thing of good schools, winner schools, and loser schools.
And then kind of self-fulfilling prophecies start to kick in.
And you get parents wanting to move into the good zones, and then you have, because I think if you have a bunch of kids from, underprivileged backgrounds, then they come with a whole bunch of different educational and social issues.
Yeah.
But then if you get a lot of them in one place, it makes it really hard for the teachers,
Totally. Yeah.
So there's just that. And once a school gets in a downward spiral, particularly if you get kids leaving that school, the role drops and then they lose teachers. So they're losing staff. And so that just creates this whole situation with morale and...
You've explained that really well. It's like all these... Well, not minor by any means, but all these potentially, seemingly smaller issues separately, when they combine, just kind of create this whirlpool where it gets worse and worse and worse. I mean, I even the zoning thing I struggle with because, I mean, maybe it was where I grew up. I didn't exactly grow up in an area of Wellington with lots of private schools and stuff, but I do think, and I don't know if this is my rose-tinted glasses or whatever, that even then, 80s and 90s, New Zealand seemed more egalitarian, and that sectioning off of, do we still say we don't have a class system? It's like it's bothersome that's happened in my life.
I know. I really don't like it, and I think when you look at the education research and you talk to those people who know about how humans work and how the education system in other countries work, having a spread of kids is really good because that's what the world is like. Yeah. But if you get them all all the rich kids go to one school and they never meet a kid who doesn't have shoes.
Unless they go on to Goldman Sachs after that, then they can live in that world all their life.
But, it's just not good for people not to know what the whole spectrum of life is like, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's just that's my perspective now, but it comes just from reading a lot of research and looking at all the OECD
your
stuff.
overall kind of perspective on life and so on has changed from Like you're saying your political viewpoints have changed from this?
Yeah, I'm not supposed to really talk about politics as a journalist, but I think, yeah.
Oh, yes, no, you aren't.
I just think, yeah, it would be good for that social mix to be in our schools, like it is in society.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
I don't think that's a political statement at all.
No,
Yeah,
but
I brought up that word.
But heaps of it is because of we have like segregated communities as well, right? Like Mangere, for example, the school there, I think there's 2 Pākehā kids at the school.
That's crazy.
But that's because Mangere in itself is largely Pacifica. So
I don't know why this comes to mind, but yeah, that whole one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. So I'm going to talk about food, bear with me here. But I watched this documentary a while ago called Food Incorporated, and it's basically about the political economy of food, okay, different stuff with that in the States. And one of the things they talked about that, when you think about it, I know exists, but I hadn't had a term to give to them, was food deserts. Have you heard of food deserts? You have heard of this. Right.
Yeah.
So it's another thing, you know, an area's already got its struggles, and then you have the equal thing where, you know, affordable places to eat move in, and it's high calorific, high sugar, low, and yeah.
yeah, and it's like that out south, right?
Yeah, well, it's to say a lot of it comes back to commerce and, you know, what's the word? Unbridled, unchecked capitalism, I guess.
Yeah, it's the free market.
The free
Our friend, the
market.
free market.
Yeah.
Yay, Rogernomics.
That's not political. Hey, you can't talk about Rogernomics. Can you please explain this to me on a bit more of a lighthearted note? You were late 20s, right?
30.
You're 30?
Yep.
So you went through, when I said fourth form, you didn't go, so you did something called fourth form?
No,
I
was the first year.
Okay.
My year's like the guinea pig year, so I was the first year when we called it year whatever. But in my head, I still know fourth form much better.
Okay, good. Unlike my students now, look at me and go,
And I did
no, they know what it is. But that wasn't the point. It was around another thing that was a much more major change, and you've written an article about it, and I need to know more about it with the students I teach. How does NCA work?
Oh, God.
Because you didn't do it, did you?
I did. I was the first year.
Oh, you were the first
of
year
it.
for that as well, so they changed everything.
Yeah.
God, that must have been... You went to school in beta phase. That's
That was
really
like
bad.
the year that we had so many days off because the teachers were striking over NCA, and the teachers would come to class instead of, you know, teaching English. They'd give us a lesson on NCA and
So
why
this
it was
is
bad.
in your third form. Whatever it is.
It would have been year 11, so fifth form.
Fifth form,
when you
yeah.
start doing exams, yeah.
Oh,
So-
man. Anyway, sorry. I'm really interested in that too, how that worked out for you being so early into it. But
No one had a clue what was going on. That's what happened.
so you feel you got a
was
good
fine.
3 years
It was fine.
education after that.
It was fine.
How does it work though? In relating to what you wrote about, is it this is asking for your opinion.
Go for it.
Do you think it's a crazy system?
I think it has the potential to be a really good system.
Yeah.
I think it's
Then-
not always used well
Yeah.
because it's very complex and it requires quite a high level of understanding from the kids and their parents because it's such a devolved system, right? They can choose these tiny little modules
Yeah.
that make up a subject. It means they really...
And then how does one school... Sorry to cut you off. How does one... When I read your article, which... Was it yours or another? Or maybe went on a Google. Did you wrote the story about how some students were doing electives like things
Yeah.
like rubbish collecting and so on?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Phew. How does a school offer all these breakdowns? I mean, when I was there, it was like maths, science, music, history, drama. Like, I don't even know how schools would be resourced to offer all those crazy different
Yeah.
kind of spider webs of topics.
So I think the schools will pick, say, with English, there's 11, little modules, and the kids would do maybe 5 for the English, but the school might offer 7. So the kids they kind of have constrained.
There's 7
choice.
Englishes.
Yeah.
It should be 1.
But they have to do, yeah, I know. So they pick one on Shakespeare, and they pick one on creative writing, and then they pick one on this.
So it's just like the breakdown of topics. Yeah, back
But
in
if
the
the
day.
kid, that's what they were talking about in that article that I talked about, the maths. So heaps of kids talked about, I did the wrong maths. And basically what they'd done was they'd picked standards that would kind of dead end, and they didn't go on to calculus or anything like that. So the kids thought they were doing maths, or their parents thought they were doing maths, but it was a maths that didn't really lead anywhere.
Or I'm guessing I had a student come up tell me last year actually that his university entrance was really compromised because he felt that the people who guided him at his school, I'm not sure whether it was teachers, whoever, had simply given him the wrong information. And I don't think it was malicious from their point of view. It's coming back to what you're saying. It's like, how long have we had the system now, and people are still trying to?
Yeah.
So how do they get? So we'll wrap this up with the NCA thing for the next 10-20 minutes. But what's broken that it's taken this long? Is it just too complicated and it needs to be rolled back and rethought about again, or?
Yeah, I don't really know. Like, I think some of it is really good to have, like, a wide variety of things, and it means you can, you know, do a multitude of different pathways, and that's good because it keeps students engaged, right? Like, a lot of NCA is about keeping students engaged. So they are keeping students a lot longer now.
Keeping them in school.
Like, a lot of them are staying in school until they're year 13, whereas before they would have gone. And they're doing, you know, a mix of maybe school, and then some days they go off and they go to Polytech and they do that. So that's really good.
It is.
But I do not, like, I always ask the principals this. I'm like, how do you do your timetable? Like, it just seems insane to me.
That's what I was
like,
saying,
the logistics of it blow my mind.
Yeah.
And I think as well, then if you're going to have all that, you need to help parents, and you need to help students pick their right pathways. And I think that's sometimes where it's falling down. And in other cases, you get schools who are maybe being a little bit paternalistic, and they're making those choices for the students and maybe just not giving them a chance. Because, you know, the whole thing is to pass, right? To pass. It's kind of being drilled from the top down. But for some students, you know, it's better to try, fail, maybe try again, and then get those credits because they do really want to do that subject. Yeah. You know? It is complicated.
But that's the word you end that description and set of suggestions and stuff with, it just seems... That's why I jokingly said at the beginning, explain NCEA, because it just seems complicated to me. But then I haven't been through the system, so perhaps it's not when you are in it.
I think what they're starting to talk about now as well is like why New Zealand has 3 years of high stakes assessment. Like, why are kids being, doing exams?
But it's school C in fifth form. I'm not going to change.
Yeah.
But is that year really that high stakes when you look back on it?
Maybe not. I don't really know.
It's just a test that's assessed nationally. I kind of feel like my driver's license was more value to me than School C, to be honest, in terms of getting a job. Really,
hey, you can get credits. You can get credits from that now too. So you would have ticked 2 boxes.
You can, except
you were ripped off.
I was ripped off.
The
state. Oh God, you probably, it's like as the journalist being interviewed, because I know that's what that night at Golden Dawn was about, but I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And, I teach kind of the theoretical, think about the future side of media where I am, as well as the practical stuff.
Yeah.
So the future of journalism. How bad are things compared to what people say? What people are saying compared to the reality? How you think things are going to change? What's going well?
Here we go.
What's going... Well, you don't have to. We can do something
we
else.
can.
I've got just a bunch of random questions in that bag if you want to just do that.
I think people have fairly rose-tinted glasses when they look at the past in terms of journalism. Like, I would
lots
say...
of things, yeah.
I would say we're turning out some excellent journalism at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's hard yakka, because especially at the Herald... You know, the Herald has to be all things to all people. Like, we need to have the latest on that car crash that happened this morning and the traffic that is ruining your commute.
Yeah.
You know, we need to have the latest on whatever consumer thing is happening.
Yeah.
You know, we need to also have big, long-form investigative pieces.
Yeah.
We need to have, you know, the school results. We need to have analysis and opinion.
Yeah.
So it is a... You know, it's not a specialised publication.
No, it's not. It's that's the whole point of it.
And equally, we don't have as many reporters as we used to because, as everyone knows, the media model is being cannibalised by the internet. I mean, I think what would be good if people would pay for some of their media. This is the thing, I don't understand people who read the Herald but don't pay for it. Like, oh, you don't like it? Don't go
Awkward.
there. Yeah.
Where do I pay for it?
Yeah.
Where do I pay for it?
Maybe there needs to be some kind of online subscription model.
Yeah.
But we don't have it.
I pay for the New York Times, but that's because it asked me to pay for it.
Yeah. I wonder if we just need to ask.
Yeah.
I think they're waiting for the merger before that proposed merger before they go down that route. But equally, I think what we did with Under the Bridge and New Zealand On Air is such a good future funding model, you know?
Oh, it's where it's going. I mean, absolutely. And the way it was his own little website, and I hope a lot of people who haven't already gone to have a look at it after this. Sorry.
No, that's all.
That's it.
Those are all my thoughts.
Yeah.
That's all I've got.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the funding model is going to be increasingly important, but
then do you think, because you say, it's the internet, which obviously is a large, factor, or new media, or whatever you want to call it, different delivery models, people not paying on the most pragmatic level. But then do you think, as media organisations increasingly conglomerate and we get the same host doing TV, radio, blah, 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 that they will actually suddenly start hiring more staff when more money comes in? Because I think if they're learning to adapt to a model with less staff, it doesn't make sense to hire more staff if you've figured out how to run with hardly any.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah.
But maybe it will just allow us to do... There might be new things happening. I mean, 10 years ago, who would know that a newspaper would make a documentary? So I think it might not necessarily even look how it looks now. Like, it might allow us to do other things if there's more money.
10 years ago, totally. 10 years ago, I never knew that I would stop completely buying the weekend paper as a part of a ritual. I probably should actually just start... It's a weird thing. I just turned around one day and went, I don't get the weekend paper anymore. But there's something really... I know, like, again, you're saying romanticising about the past. This is perhaps me doing that. But as that occurred to me, there is something much nicer about that than kind of sitting there with your smartphone in the weekend and so on. Yeah,
the weekend paper is one of my all-time favourites. It feels like such a luxury to be able to sit there with your coffee and look at it and touch it. And
in the UK, they were... I don't know if you've spent time over there, but they were so freaking big. They'd come in like a plastic bag, and it would take me till like Friday the next week just to kind of get through everything in there.
What a dream.
What a dream. What a time we lived in.
No, but I think online, I mean, as much as everyone whinges about the internet kind of eating into our advertising revenue, it does allow us to do awesome stuff. And it does mean that
but it allows for an immediacy that we were never allowed for before,
And people can read things. Like, how great is it being able to go and read the New York Times online, or the Guardian, or the Washington Post?
Yeah.
Like, it's great.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It used to be. I can't say I was always a New York Times and Guardian reader in New Zealand here, because it used to be quite a fringy thing to do, to have a subscription to one of those papers. The fake news thing, that's probably another thing you get asked about a lot, but it's just occurred to me to chat to you about that as well. To me, that was just a tagline for what's been going on. That's to me a real symptom of the internet, which is some audience members have learnt to disseminate good information from bad. Others haven't. Do you think the way I'm phrasing this is such a loaded question? Do you think it's more a case of that a lot of the time than this is fake news? It's like, well, no, you're a muppet because you didn't notice. That
I just think, like, whenever you talk to an arts lecturer, if you go and ask them why should people do a BA, they say because in those classes people learn about critical thinking.
Thank you.
And it's like,
thank you.
That is what we need. Because I think, like, what I would compare it to is like when your friends tell you some gossip, right? Your friends tell you, oh my god, did you hear this thing? And you were like, that is not real in your head, or that is real. How do you know that? Like, how do you know that? And
so
I think
fact versus opinion.
Yeah, and then people just don't apply that to, because they're like, well, it's on the internet, and you're like, no, apply your brain, like, apply.
What has started to really bother me, and I've actually started to pull back from... I engaged last week, actually. I shouldn't have. I cut and pasted. It doesn't matter.
Is this Facebook regret?
Yeah, sort of. Well, it's not regret. It's just what's actually freaking me out is there's a movement that's developing with that where, like, I'll really politely point out to someone that's a bad source, man. Like, read this or maybe do that, blah, blah, blah. And then all these people who are haven't learnt how to sort good information from bad will pile onto me like their information is actually different to mine rather than not credible. Does that make sense?
Like, they think you can have different facts on the same thing. You're like, nope.
Well, I think they've got a leader now, and he's leading the free world, so people feel really safe in whatever that is. That really quite terrifies me.
Yeah, arguing, and I also think people argue over things that are opinion, like
that's what
as if they're fact. You're like, no, it's not a fact. It's an opinion, And I think that's where you get into problems on the internet.
I think, and again, this would be anyone who knows, what I've been doing for work for the last few years could be construed as me pushing an agenda, but it's from a place of worry for the population at large. I feel like if media studies at high school at the moment is running around with cameras and learning a little bit about how to write a journalistic piece and blah, 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 that's great, but I think media critique needs to be a serious part of the high school syllabus, because where else do we get our stories from? I don't know about you. I don't go to the church hall like people would have 50 years ago. I don't, it's like that's where we get our information, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think there should be it maybe taught in high school. Yeah,
I think high school. Why not?
Because lots of people don't. Lots of people don't go and do a BA and learn it.
No, that's what I'm meaning. Yeah.
So yeah.
But I think there's more call for it now because because it's not just 3 or 4 institutions you'd hope had quality checks and balances. It's just like it's everywhere.
And I don't understand how people. I mean, how they wouldn't understand that, like, a reputable source is a reputable source. So if you read something on Reuters or the New Zealand Herald or Stuff or whatever, it is going to be true. Like, Yeah,
but it's because this is actually good you've said it like that, because this is where, it's like, I think that's what I was getting at before when I get piled on Facebook. It's like, it feels like, you're an elitist or whatever and blah, blah, blah. And to me, it's like, those people actually, it's sad they haven't learnt those skills.
Yeah, it's
not me going ha 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 and pointing the finger. It's going, look, I'm trying to extend a hand here and say blah 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 blah. So it's because it's not somewhere along the line it hasn't been taught. And like you say, not everyone goes to uni, and I don't think everyone should go to uni. I think that's ridiculous. No. So get it somewhere early in your schooling, because like I say, it's not just the Dominion and the Herald and the Listener and TV1 and 2 and so on and so forth now.
Anymore, I was reading this piece at the weekend about, like, the propaganda in the 30s, around Hitler and everything. 30s and 40s.
You know what propaganda's best ever move was? Changing its name to PR.
Yeah. But I think propaganda, like, isn't fake news just a new word for propaganda, maybe? I don't know. Yeah,
it's propaganda if it comes from someone wanting to spread information, I guess, for political gain or whatever. But then aren't some of these sites just money weirdo
making
in his underwear, like running a fake news site for this? There's so many different...
Because they can monetize it, right?
Yeah, they can monetize it, or maybe they've got mental health issues. I don't know. I think there's... Yeah, who knows where a lot of these things derive from.
But it was interesting because, like, back before the internet, like, people would find the propaganda took hold, right? Because people found it really hard to fact check.
But it's taking hold now en masse, I've just told you.
Yeah, but it's like, but now you're like, you can fact check, like,
but people don't. That's what I've been saying.
I know. It's frustrating.
It's a big weird loop.
It is.
How about that with being you're in the public eye in terms of media? So I've described my own social media kind of conundrums. What's your relationship with social media? Have you lost the plot at it a few times? Have you engaged where you shouldn't have?
100%.
How do you engage now as Kirsty the reporter compared to your own private accounts? Because it would piss me off if someone said something dumb about something I'd spent ages on. To be honest.
Yeah, it does. You just have to let it go. It's like, don't read the comments. I quit Twitter kind of this time last year and a half about. I just got sick of it. I was like, God, I'm sick of you people. And then
And who are you people?
Oh yeah, I was like, what are you?
No, who are they? Like just readers,
just people. I don't know. It was over a story I did on a young guy who had a baby. He was only 17 or something, and he'd been made the head boy at his school, and it was super unusual. And so we rang him up and talked to him about it. And then we published a story about this young guy who had a baby, who had been made head boy at his school, and people are like, you wouldn't do this if it was a girl. I was like, do you know of a head girl with a baby? Because I will write that story. And then all these people just jumped up and down about like the patriarchy, and I was like, are you actually serious?
Again, it's like just find an issue and
I was like,
grab
just
onto it.
Go outside, please. You know? And I was like, oh God, I'm sick of this, so I left. And then a few months later, I think it was an earthquake, and I was on a live shift at work, and I needed Twitter because it's really good in that situation.
Like
so I jumped back on, but I muted about half the country to just maintain my sanity.
What do you mean muted? You just like unfollow?
Yeah, and then there's a mute button, so you can just like they can tweet, but you never see it.
It's very nice of you. I would have just unfollowed, but politically that's not a good idea, you figure.
Well, because they can also get retweeted into your timeline, so even if you...
I don't understand Twitter. I like Facebook because
it
feels a bit more friends and family. It feels a bit more like I can kind of contain the...
Yeah. I have a professional Facebook page for work, and then I have an Instagram, so I guess people can follow me there if they enjoy pictures of like babies and dogs.
I didn't find your Instagram. I mean, I won't say
I won't get excited about it.
I won't say I social media stalked you, but I do look at the first 3 pages of Google for every guest. Yeah, and I found your professional Facebook page, your Twitter. Was your Twitter page up? I can't remember.
Yeah.
But I found this hilarious blog that, again, just buying into bullshit, like after the fact, had some comment about how you'd gone into Twitter rage. And
oh, yeah.
It was like some... Yeah.
Again,
so that's how I found out.
Go outside.
It's like go outside.
Would be my advice to those people.
And yeah, so I wonder, I've talked to not journalists by any means, but just people actually it was because I've got a broadcast background. I had Mikey Havoc in here, and we talked about texting and the radio, and he sort of expressed similar. It's sort of like the audience getting a voice is like my comment about the internet overall. It's like it's really, really great in some ways, but it's really quite hard work and tough in others. Yeah. And I do wonder why. We'll get off this in a sec. Just psychology-wise, if you could take a guess, why do people pile onto you like that? What you're saying because they need fresh air?
Yeah, I really don't understand it. I guess people somehow take things in a way that they're not meant to be taken. Like they just feel affronted by something, and then they see other people having a go, and they're like, yeah. It's like the group think.
But then, do you think that they don't? You're less humanised because you're the name in the article, or you're the? Because I talked to Mike about that as well. Like it's almost like you become a weird kind of public property, and it's like, hang on a sec. Would you say that to your mum? Would you say that to your kid?
Yeah,
would you say that to your teacher?
I'm all for people critiquing my work in like a fair manner, but when they're just like
throwing shit around.
Oh, and it's just when you're just like you're actually like insane. That is not how that happened. And then people start in with the conspiracy theories, which I think is one of my number ones faves. Like, how did the hero get this story? Is she related to those people? And you're like, no. I mean, maybe it's New Zealand, but no.
Maybe you did say you were from Hamilton.
Yeah, I know.
And then, okay, look, what's the good side of it in your line of work, social media?
Oh, it gives you an awesome platform to be able to, engage with your readers. It's great. I do like that, and I do like that people can contact me on there, and I do like that I can I make lots of contacts on there, and I like reading everyone else's stuff. Yeah. I like it when something I've written, you can clearly see it gaining traction. Because I think before social media, you'd write a big story, it'd go on the front page of the paper, and maybe the paper would sell out that day, and you'd be like, it could have been my story, but maybe maybe that was also just the racing day, and people wanted the horses, So it is nice to be able to see in real time that your story is getting traction.
And have you had times where you have, how do I put it, like learned or taken stock or changed an approach or something like that from, great word you used, I think you said constructive social media feedback, you know? I don't mean have people called you out, but in a way I kind of do mean have people called you out in a constructive way that has made you better at what you do.
Yeah, like at the moment we're doing a series about poverty in the Pacific,
Yeah.
and somebody that I respect posted a critique of the way we'd gone about it on Facebook, and I read it and I thought those are all really good points, and I'm going to think about that whilst I write the rest of the stories, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I really like that. Like, heaps of the time it is valuable to see what people think of your work and just to engage with other people's viewpoints.
Coming back, this is a huge backtrack, but I was really interested in the whole Under the Bridge process. So, this is going back quite far. So, all that time, I guess, on in the field, out at the school, trying to put together this sort of multimedia project, you said you almost took on a producer role with the film. How the hell did you get the time to write it? Did you do all of that afterwards, or was that a work in progress all the way through? How many words is it?
It's
felt like a lot.
It's 8,000 words.
Okay. So
did it feel long?
No, it felt great. Short. It's all over. No, it didn't feel long. I thought it was written in such a way it was conversational. 8,000 words, though. I was thinking. I mean, that's
many words.
Well, it's longer than when I did a postgrad diploma for my main essay. Was only about 6,000 words, so that's up there. Was that just the icing on the cake, work-wise, at the end? But I guess for you, that's the main part of the gig at the end of it all, is to get the words out, right?
Yeah, the doco was still the main part. Like, I was kind of deeply involved in all of that. But yeah, the written piece, the point of it, and we did a few supplementary videos as well, was just to give that context around.
So it wasn't supposed to be 8,000 words, it just turned into it?
Well, I always felt, I had a feeling that it was going to be quite long.
Context sounds like 1,200 words.
I know, but it was so hard because I really wanted to paint this picture of how things had got how they had, and so to do that you do need to go into like socio-political background and the history of that place.
So it took a long time just to do the written part.
Oh yeah, my notes are insane. They're insane. It took a long time, maybe about 3 weeks to write it.
I don't know whether it's specific to academic writing, actually, because I do, my journalistic outlet at the moment is writing for Audio Culture, and I was just thinking I do get it there as well. So last couple of questions, but in your line of work, please tell me you get writer's block sometimes. You don't. You just write. You look at me like,
No, I
you
definitely
don't get it.
No, I do.
Yeah.
I definitely get writer's block. It's hard.
Is it sort of procrastinating?
It's procrastinating.
Or sometimes if I try and flip it in a positive way, I call the procrastinating, it's like processing.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes you're not ready to write, and then you whip yourself because you feel like you've got to be at the keyboard, but it's not happening. Yeah,
all of that. I think getting those first few paragraphs for me, like getting the opening of anything, is always the hardest.
Yeah.
Getting the tone right.
Yeah. That's too cheesy. That's too this. That doesn't have the right rhythm.
Like, I actually do my best thinking in the shower, so usually I'll like have a shower and be like, oh my god, I've got it, and I'll have like 3 sentences in my head. I'll come out and be like looking for my phone to type it down.
Yeah, and then that's the rhythm thing as well. I was talking about just the art of writing at the end. That's nice because sometimes for me, some of my favourite writers, it's almost like what's in between the words. Like even if it's newspaper writing, whatever, it's that rhythm and that feel that I think a lot of writers ultimately don't ever get. Who do you like just for their? And I'm gonna confine it to non-fiction writers for this exercise, because there probably is more of that rhythm and stuff traditionally in fiction. Whose writing do you just like reading internationally?
Internationally?
Feature, locally, whatever.
I really like, locally, Steve Borneas is one of my favourites. I love the way he paces his stories and kind of like the ingrained humour in everything that he does. Yeah. Even when it's a sad story, you can kind of feel that. in there.
The Max Key one was a little weird though, but yes.
Yeah, there's also a guy called Gene Weingarten. He's won a lot of
Where's he from?
Pulitzers. I think he's Washington Post.
Yeah.
But he wrote one about babies dying in hot cars, like kids being left in hot cars.
Yeah.
It was one like a really great story.
Yeah.
And also Lane DeGregory. I mean, she's won a couple of Pulitzers too. Her work is always incredible, and yeah, they're all the same actually. They have that sense of pacing and the exact right quotes, that you know that they've done a huge interview but they've only pulled out the two perfect quotes, and I think it's such an art rather than just kind of doing a notebook dump and being like, see you later.
And so how have you learned about all of that over the years? I mean, there's so much training, but do you feel like you had mentors, or it's just a matter of reading all those different styles? How are they doing that, and combination of all of that? Or
yeah, I think reading a lot is probably the most helpful. Like quite often when I'm writing a piece, I will have another piece that I look at just for tone and stuff, or I'll look at it and be like, how did they do that? You know, how did they weave that together? Oh, okay, I see. Yeah. I'll do that. Yeah. But yeah, I have a few mentors as well. I feel like I could ask Steve. I've never really asked him for help with my writing because he's kind of
But you're
a
in the
genius.
same building together.
No,
he's a genius. Goodness, that's quite a word. There aren't many geniuses around.
Yeah, but David Fisher and Matt Nipper and those guys on our team, they're all really supportive. I mean, Kim Knight, she's a beautiful writer at the Herald, and she'll help me out.
But I'm going to have Duncan Grieve on next week. What shall I ask him about the spin-off?
Oh, I don't know. This is a conflict of interest for me because my boyfriend works there. The spin-off, I don't know. I wonder where it's going to go next.
Okay, great. That's perfect. Because I was like, I wonder how it came from where it came from so quickly, and where it's going to go next. Because it's pretty freaking indie for how big it's got.
Yeah, it's such a little mushroom, eh?
Mushroom?
Growing and growing. Yeah, it just kind of sprung up out of nowhere. And
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Lastly, there's a bag over there.
Yeah.
That's the awkward satchel of segues. Not that it's been awkward, but that's just a random question to end. They're not written for you, by the way.
Are they for you?
And my writing's really crap. Oh, do you want me to read it?
Oh, do I read it? I've already thrown it at you now.
Okay.
The awkward satchel of segues.
It was your day off today, eh?
I was sick.
Okay. What was something you meant to do today and didn't? Why not?
Oh, I was meant to write a feature about the challenges of being a woman in the Solomon Islands, and I did not do
You meant
that.
to write the whole thing today?
Yes, I was, and I instead had a 2-hour sleep and then watched an episode of The Good Wife because I've got a cold.
Of The Good Life?
Good Wife, The Good Wife.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was supposed to do that, so now instead I have to write that in one day tomorrow, so...
Oh, look, I didn't realise you were that ill that you'd taken the day off, so I think you've been more than accommodating based on that. Thanks so much. Do you have far to go to
No, just...
get back to your sick
Mount Eden.
bed?
It's okay. I'm not... I just felt very hot. Actually, and then I convinced myself I had malaria because I've just come back from the islands.
Speaking of internet information, good old WebMD. I've got malaria. Sorry, I can't come into work. I've been on 3 different medical sites. Thanks for coming in anyway. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Bye.